Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Coventry Grace. My name is Nora. Let's study the Bible. So last video I said I was going to combine chapters 5 and 6 of Genesis, but full disclosure here, once I started reading and studying chapter 5, I realized there is way too much here to not dive deeper into it. And I think it would be a disservice to the text and to the study to try to combine it with chapter 6. So this video, we really are just going to do chapter 5 and then do chapter 6 next week, hopefully. Also, I am working out of a plain notebook today, trying to combine a summary with the observation section like I said I was doing last time. Just wasn't being true to the method. Observation shouldn't be a summary of the section. If we're going to summarize this section, it should be just that, a summary. Definitely stay tuned because I am working to create a new study guide that incorporates a summary section and also that has more information in the prompt section that I thought was really lacking in my current version of the study guides. All of that housekeeping stuff out of the way, let's move on to talking about chapter 5 of Genesis, which in my Bible is titled Adam's Descendants to Noah. Instead of jumping straight into observation, I'm going to include how to summarize a passage. The easiest way to summarize something is to focus on the subject and the verb, such as who did what or who said what. My summary of chapter 5 is this. God created man and woman in his likeness. God blessed them. Adam fathered Seth, and then the name of each patriarch from Seth all the way down to Enoch, who walked with God. And then Lamech, who fathered Noah. Noah was to bring relief from the toil, and then the names of his 3 sons. Obviously, you don't have to include a summary of the passage before writing observations, but I found that doing this is a great way to set yourself up for observation because you have already teased out the main events from the section. Let's move into observation. Observation asks the question, what does the text say? We can divide this big question into 3 different categories. Information about the author, information about the passage, and information about God and man. These are the questions that would give us insight into the author. You want to ask yourself, who is writing? What role did they play in history? Where are they located while they are writing? Are they writing to a particular audience? What kind of contact did the author have with God and or Jesus Christ? Now, not every one of these questions will apply to every author. Looking at chapter 5 specifically, we know that Moses wrote the book of Genesis. We don't know where he was physically located while recording this information, but we do know that he's writing a historical narrative and that he had this very deep relationship with God that we'll read more about later in the Bible. He plays a monumental role in the history of the Israelites. He's a big deal. This is a man who was charged by God to lead his people out of Egypt. And that is the same man who is recording this information that we are reading in Genesis. So moving into the observation about the passage itself, you would ask yourself questions such as, are there repeated words or phrases or connecting words? And what is the actual structure of the passage? Does it have a beginning, middle, end? Or does it have a point made and then explained or something different? Chapter 5 of Genesis has a lot of the same characteristics of Moses' previous writing. We get that kind of zoom in and zoom out thing that he does, where he seems to spend time setting a scene with broad strokes and then zooming in to spend time in a particular situation. There is definitely repetition in this passage and almost a formula that is repeated when it comes to the names and ages of the patriarchs that he's naming. It goes like this. This person lived X number of years, fathered this person, lived X number of more years, and then died, and so on and so on. This list is interrupted just slightly when he gets to Enoch. He says instead of dying, Enoch was not, meaning God took him. He actually didn't taste death. Then he gets down to Noah and stops there. You can tell he's setting the scene for a detailed account of Noah because of this explanation of Noah. The text says Noah is the one who will bring them relief from their toil. I just said Noah a bunch of times. Observations about God and man. The text calls us back to God creating man in his likeness and indirectly mentions the hardness of labor that we should remember is a consequence of sin entering the world. God is also directly mentioned in having a relationship with Enoch and then taking him out of earth and up to heaven. Man in this passage has been very fruitful. We're seeing many, many generations, and in this time frame, we're seeing man struggling under sin's consequence. Once we've gone through the passage and made as many observations as we can move on to the interpretation. Interpretation asks us, what does the text mean? How we're going to figure that out is by asking lots of questions about the observations that we just made. We need to ask why the author wrote what he did in the way that he did. Why were some things emphasized and repeated while others were not? What does the passage reveal about the character of both God and man? And what does the author want us to do with the information he has just told us? I had two big questions while interpreting this passage. Why the list, and why talk about Enoch? Going back to what Moses is writing, he's writing a historical narrative, so he had to get us from Cain and Abel to Noah, but the way that he did that was different than any other genealogy record we've read thus far. The only other one we've seen is when he described the land of Cain down to Lamech, a different Lamech than we'll talk about in this chapter. Lamech. Now, I could very easily see the way these two lists differed. If we look back at Genesis 4, verses 17 through 22, we get a short list of names and then a little information about what some of the people did as far as their profession goes, and then what they were known for. Comparing that to the list in Genesis 5, we get each patriarch's name, how long they lived before they fathered their son, how much longer they lived after that, and then each record ends the same, and they died. I knew it was different, but to be honest, I couldn't figure out why the fact that it was different was such a big deal until I read the commentary on this section. This is what I mean when I say that when you read a comprehensive commentary, you'll often find that your observations are leading you in the right direction, but you may not have gone deep enough. And that's what I experienced in this chapter. For this passage, I went to the Blue Letter Bible's website, which also has Matthew Henry's commentary. Previously, I had shown it on BibleGateway.org, but BLB also has it. This is where I read that Moses is telling each name to link Adam to each generation that will one day, thousands of years later, lead to Jesus Christ. He references Luke 3:23. If you go to that passage, you'll see all of the names that start with Jesus, then Joseph, and so on, and ends with Adam, the Son of God. This was my aha moment, and to be quite honest, this is my Roman Empire. Something else to think about is the age of these people in this time period. Because they were living so long, that means two very important things. Number one, they had so many more children than we probably think they did. And also, they were all able to live in the same time frame. Can you imagine being alive with your great, I don't know how many greats I'm supposed to say, grandfather, and hearing his wisdom and his account of creation? By God allowing people to live this long, he is preserving the account of creation very well because it is being passed down by people with firsthand knowledge of it. Let's talk about Enoch. The reason the formula was interrupted, you're reading along and all of a sudden, wait, what? This guy didn't have to die. God literally just snatched him up instead. This is a pretty stark contrast. We're in this rhythm of he died, and then suddenly Enoch was not. That's definitely there for a reason. Moses said that Enoch walked with God. Enoch. I was right with that one. Walking with someone means what? You're walking beside them and you're walking in the same direction. Another commentary on the BLB's website is a study guide by David Guzik. Hope I'm saying that right. And he says this: if men walk contrary to God, he will not walk with them, but contrary to them. Walking together implies amity, friendship, intimacy, love, and these things cannot exist between God and the soul unless the man is acceptable unto the Lord. And David Guzik is quoting Charles Spurgeon right there. That's not a quote by David, that's a quote by Charles Spurgeon. As time goes on, you're probably going to hear me talk a lot about Charles Spurgeon in the same way that I talk about Matthew Henry. What this passage reveals about the character of God is that God honors the faithful. That was my main idea for this passage. God honored Enoch's faithfulness by safeguarding him against mortality. Moses is giving us all the information we need to understand what the world was like in that time. The world was so full of people because everyone lived longer, therefore having more offspring. Mankind was in a bad way, toiling under the curse of sin. We know this because when Lamech talks about why he named Noah, he mentions how hard the labor was. And yet we see God honoring those who are faithful to him. One thing I want to point out is that I didn't have a whole lot of success in interpreting this passage without the help of a couple of commentaries, and that is completely okay. Sometimes it's going to be very apparent what the point of a message is, but other times you're going to need to rely on sources to wrap your head around the meaning of what you're studying. Once we have interpreted the passage, we can move on to application. Application of the passage means what does the text require, or how do I need to change in light of what I just learned? Inward application could mean you are convicted of a particular sin, or a promise of God's was brought to light that you need to believe in. Outward application asks what you can do for others in light of what you just learned, such as sharing the gospel or praying for a particular friend or person in need. For me, this passage gave me such a deeper understanding of the history of this time period and the magnitude of what actually happened. We know what's coming. We know that the flood is coming very quickly because Noah is born. And I don't think I have ever thought about how many people there were on earth that were wiped out until I read Genesis 5. It brought a sense of humility to my life, that my life is such a brief blip on the radar. And also, there is obviously a person that we want to emulate here, and that person is Enoch. To have a heart so pleasing to God that you literally walk alongside him. This wraps up our study of Genesis 5. I hope you guys enjoyed studying this passage as much as I did, and I'll be honest, I was so surprised that there was so much to unpack here. Comment what you guys thought down below, and as always, I hope you guys like the video and subscribe to my channel.